What if I told you that your very search for happiness is precisely what prevents you from finding it? You see, we've been taught that happiness is something to pursue, to chase after like a child running to catch a butterfly. But here's the thing. The moment you open your hand to examine what you've caught, it flies away. Think about it. When are you most content? Is it not in those rare moments when you've forgotten to ask whether you're happy? The paradox lies before us like a Zen koan. Happiness is not a destination to be reached, but a way of traveling. It's not something to possess, but something to notice. Let me tell you something about this counterintuitive truth that might just set you free. We live in a culture obsessed with the pursuit of happiness. Look around you. The advertisements, the self-help books, the courses and seminars and retreats, all promising to give you the secret formula, the magic key, the perfect method to unlock lasting happiness. And yet, the more frantically we chase it, the more it seems to elude us. Strange, is it not? Consider how we behave. We buy the new car, the bigger house, the latest technology. The rush of pleasure comes, bright and intoxicating. Then it fades. Always it fades. So we seek the next purchase, the next hit of satisfaction. You know this cycle. We all do. Or perhaps you pursue achievements, the promotion, the degree, the recognition. You tell yourself, when I reach this goal, then I will be happy. The goal arrives. A moment of satisfaction follows. Then the emptiness returns, and with it, the need for a new goal, a higher mountain to climb. The cycle continues, endless and exhausting. Maybe you seek happiness in relationships. If only I find the right partner, the perfect friend group, the ideal community. Then I will be happy. But even our most cherished relationships cannot bear the weight of our happiness demands. They buckle under the pressure, leaving us confused and disappointed. I once knew a man who had achieved everything society told him would bring happiness. Wealth beyond measure, status and recognition, a beautiful family, a home overlooking the ocean. By all external metrics, his life was perfect. But here's the thing. In a moment of rare honesty, he confided in me that he felt hollow inside, empty. His life had become an endless series of acquisitions and accomplishments, none of which had delivered the contentment he so desperately sought. His pursuit had consumed him, leaving no space for the very thing he was chasing. You see, there is a fundamental mistake in how we approach happiness. We treat it as something to be hunted down, captured, and possessed. But happiness is not a butterfly to be caught. It is the sky in which the butterfly flies. It is not a destination to be reached. It is the ground beneath our feet. Now, there are three fundamental ways we sabotage our own happiness through seeking. First, we mistake pleasure for happiness. Second, we postpone happiness to some future moment. And third, we believe happiness comes from external circumstances rather than our relationship to them. Let us consider the first illusion. Pleasure is wonderful. The taste of ripe fruit, the warmth of sunlight on skin, the embrace of someone we love. These sensations bring joy, as they should. But pleasure is fleeting by its very nature. It rises and falls like waves on the ocean. Happiness, true happiness, is something deeper. It is the capacity to be at peace with both the rising and falling of pleasure, to neither cling to its presence nor fear its absence. We confuse the ripples on the surface with the vastness of the ocean below. We chase the waves, never realizing we are already immersed in the water. Just as fish might search everywhere for this thing called water, not recognizing it as the very element in which they live and move and have their being. The second illusion is equally seductive. We continually push happiness into the future. I will be happy when I graduate, when I get the job, when I retire, when the kids are grown. When, always when, never now. The future becomes a place where happiness resides, always just beyond our grasp. But there is only now, this moment, this breath, this experience. If happiness is not available now, it will not be available then, for then will be another now when it arrives. And the third illusion is perhaps the most widespread. We believe our happiness depends on the arrangement of external circumstances. If only the world would cooperate with our desires. If only people would behave as we wish. If only events would unfold according to our plans. Then we would be happy. But the world, people, events, they rarely conform to our expectations. And so our happiness becomes hostage to forces beyond our control. What if happiness isn't something you achieve, but something you notice when you stop trying to grasp it? What if, like the clear blue sky, it has been present all along, obscured only by the clouds of our seeking? Consider the mountain stream. It does not strive to reach the ocean. It simply flows, following the natural contours of the land, moving around obstacles rather than struggling against them. And in that effortless movement, it finds its way home. We could learn much from water. Its strength lies not in force but in flexibility, not in resistance but in acceptance. You see, when we stop chasing happiness as if it were something separate from ourselves, something to be attained, we create space for it to emerge naturally, like a flower opening to the sun. Not because we have willed it to bloom, but because we have provided the conditions in which blooming is possible. Think of those rare, precious moments when you have been completely absorbed in something. Perhaps working with your hands, or walking in nature, or engaged in meaningful conversation. In those moments, the question of whether you are happy or not simply doesn't arise. You are too fully present to worry about your state of happiness. And yet, looking back, weren't those among your happiest moments? There is a great teaching in this, if we have the wisdom to recognize it. Let us examine the first illusion more deeply. We mistake pleasure for happiness. Pleasure is not happiness, though we have been conditioned to believe they are the same thing. Pleasure is temporary, dependent on external stimuli, rising and falling with predictable regularity. It appears when conditions are favorable and disappears when they are not. Happiness, true happiness, runs deeper. It is like the depths of the ocean, vast and still, untroubled by the waves that dance upon its surface. The waves come and go. The ocean remains. Have you noticed how quickly the joy of a new purchase fades? That car you coveted for months, the rush of finally sitting behind the wheel, the pride as you drove through your neighborhood. Where is that feeling now? Has it not been replaced by normalcy, perhaps even dissatisfaction? How the excitement of achievement is replaced by restlessness for the next goal. The promotion celebrated on Friday becomes the new normal by Monday morning. The mind already scanning the horizon for the next target. Our culture has perfected the art of pleasure creation. We have more entertainment, more comfort, more sensory stimulation than any civilization in history. And yet we also have more depression, more anxiety, more emptiness. Is this not the strangest paradox? The more aggressively we pursue pleasure, the less satisfied we become. Like drinking salt water to quench thirst, our consumption habits leave us more parched than before. You see, We have created a society where people drive cars they cannot afford to impress people they do not like, to buy temporary relief from an emptiness they cannot name. We work jobs we hate to buy things we do not need to impress people who are not paying attention. If aliens were observing our species, they would surely be puzzled by this peculiar behavior. Perhaps they would conclude that we are conducting an elaborate experiment to see how much pleasure it takes to compensate for a lack of meaning. The results so far are not encouraging. Now let us turn to the second illusion. We postpone happiness to some future moment. How often do you find yourself thinking, I will be happy when? I will be happy when I get the degree. I will be happy when I find the partner. I will be happy when I make the money. I will be happy when I lose the weight. I will be happy when I retire. Always becoming, always becoming, always becoming, never being. Think back to a goal you were certain would bring you lasting happiness once achieved. Perhaps you can recall the anticipation, the certainty that this accomplishment would transform your life. And then it happened. You reached the goal. Do you remember how quickly the satisfaction faded? How rapidly your mind began constructing the next goal? The next when? You see, the mind that postpones happiness will always postpone happiness. This is its nature, its programming. Like a horizon that recedes as we approach it, the happiness we project into the future remains eternally out of reach. Consider the traveler so fixated on reaching their destination that they notice nothing of the journey. Not the changing landscapes outside the window, not the interesting fellow travelers they might have conversed with, not the unexpected discoveries that await those who are present to the path itself. They arrive at their destination only to realize they have missed the journey entirely. And was the journey not the point all along? The spiritual traditions of the world have been telling us this truth for thousands of years. The kingdom of heaven is within you, not in some distant realm. Nirvana is not a place to be reached, but a way of being in the world. Enlightenment is not an achievement, but a recognition of what was always present. These teachings point to the same fundamental truth. There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. The third illusion may be the most stubborn of all. We believe that happiness comes from external circumstances, that if we could just arrange the world to our liking, get all the pieces in the right places, then we would be happy. The right job, the right partner, the right home, the right body, the right weather. If only, if only, if only. But look around you. Do you not know people who have everything society tells us should make them happy, yet remain profoundly miserable? The wealthy executive who cannot sleep at night, the famous celebrity who cannot maintain a relationship, the physically beautiful person consumed by insecurity. And conversely, do you not know people who maintain their joy and peace despite challenging circumstances? The person facing serious illness with equanimity. The individual who has lost everything yet radiates gratitude. The one with few material possessions but abundant contentment. What explains this apparent contradiction? If happiness truly came from external circumstances, then all those with favorable conditions would be happy, and all those with unfavorable conditions would be miserable. But this is demonstrably not the case. Something else must be at work. Think about it. Have not your happiest moments often come unexpectedly, when you were not trying to create the perfect conditions? Perhaps while engaged in meaningful conversation with a friend, or immersed in creative work that challenged and fulfilled you, or witnessing something of beauty in the natural world. In these moments, you were not monitoring your happiness level. You were not checking to see if conditions were perfect. You were simply present, engaged, alive to the moment. You see, happiness does not depend on what happens. It depends on how we relate to what happens. It is not the external event, but our internal response that determines our experience. The ancient Stoics understood this well. It is not things themselves that trouble us, but our opinions about things. Change the opinion, and the experience changes, even when the external circumstances remain the same. Now, what happens when we stop these three patterns? When we release the very idea that happiness is something to be sought? What opens up when we no longer mistake pleasure for happiness? No longer postpone happiness to the future? No longer believe happiness comes from external conditions? What becomes possible? Something quite extraordinary begins to unfold. We discover a happiness that was present all along, obscured only by our searching. Like removing dark glasses and discovering the world was always bright. Like opening clenched fists and finding the treasure was always in our open palms. But I am getting ahead of myself. Before we explore this discovery, let us be clear about what we are saying. I am not suggesting that pleasure is bad, that goals are meaningless, or that circumstances are irrelevant. Not at all. Pleasure is a beautiful part of human experience. Goals provide useful direction. And of course, some circumstances are more conducive to well-being than others. The problem lies not in these things themselves, but in our relationship to them. In mistaking the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself, in confusing the means with the end, in believing that happiness is something to be acquired rather than something to be realized. The truth, when we are ready to receive it, is both simpler and more profound than we imagined. And it begins with a radical shift in perspective, a letting go of the very search that has consumed us for so long. What if I told you that happiness is your natural state, covered only by your efforts to find it? That your very search for happiness is like a cloud obscuring the sun that has been shining all along? This may sound like nonsense to the seeking mind. After all, our entire cultural mythology tells us that happiness must be pursued, achieved, earned. But what if this very belief is the obstacle? Think of a clear mountain pool. When the water is still, it perfectly reflects the sky, the trees, the mountains. But stir that water, reach into it grasping for the reflection, and the image shatters into 1,000 ripples. So it is with happiness. Our efforts to grasp it disturb the very conditions that allow it to be revealed. Now, there are three fundamental approaches to experiencing the happiness that is already your natural state. Let me share them with you. First, the practice of presence. Most of us live with our attention split between regrets about the past and anxieties about the future. We are rarely fully here in this moment, the only moment in which life actually occurs. The past exists only as memory. The future exists only as imagination. But this now, this is where life happens. This is where happiness is available. Right now, as you listen to these words, can you feel the aliveness of this moment before you label it as good or bad? The sensations in your body, the sounds around you, the rhythm of your breathing. This moment, just as it is, contains a completeness that requires nothing to be added or taken away. When you are fully present, the seeking mind naturally quiets. The endless commentary about how life should be different temporarily ceases. And in that space, your natural state of well-being can emerge, like water flowing when you stop clenching your fist. You see, presence is not something you achieve. It is what remains when you stop distracting yourself from what is already here. It is like opening a door to a room you never left. The happiness we seek has been with us all along, hidden in plain sight, obscured only by our lack of attention to the present moment. The second approach is accepting what is. Much of our suffering comes from resistance to reality as it presents itself. We argue with what is happening. It should not be raining. My partner should not have said that. This traffic should not be moving so slowly. I should not be feeling this emotion. We exhaust ourselves fighting against the flow of life rather than moving with it. I once knew someone who faced the most difficult circumstances imaginable. The loss of health, financial security, and the companionship of loved ones, all within a short period. By any conventional standard, this person had every reason to be miserable, and for a time, they were. But then something shifted. Not the external circumstances, which remained challenging. What changed was their relationship to those circumstances. They stopped fighting against reality and began to accept it as it was. Not because it was good, but because it was real. And in that acceptance, they discovered a profound peace that transcended their conditions. I have noticed in my own experience that my suffering comes not from what happens, but from my argument with what happens. When I resist reality, I create tension. When I accept it, I create space. Space for clarity, for wisdom, for appropriate response rather than automatic reaction. And in that space, a natural well-being emerges that does not depend on circumstances being a particular way. Now, our culture tells us that happiness comes from controlling our environment, from making things go our way. But this is a path to perpetual frustration, for much of life remains stubbornly beyond our control. What we can control, always, is our relationship to whatever arises. And it is in this relationship, not in the circumstances themselves, that our freedom lies. The third approach is the release of self-preoccupation. Have you noticed how much of your mental energy is consumed with thoughts about yourself? How am I doing? How do I look? Am I successful enough? Am I good enough? Do people like me? What does this say about me? The mind circles endlessly around the concept of self, evaluating, comparing, defending, enhancing. This constant self-referencing is exhausting. More importantly, it blocks our natural capacity for happiness. Think about the times when you have been happiest. Were they not moments when you temporarily forgot yourself? Perhaps while deeply engaged in meaningful work, or immersed in the beauty of nature, or in loving connection with others. In these moments of self-forgetting, happiness arises naturally, not as something you grasp, but as something you notice when the barriers to it have temporarily dissolved. Self-concern acts like clouds temporarily blocking the sun of your natural happiness. The sun never stops shining. It is always there, above the clouds. But from our perspective, it appears to come and go. So it is with happiness. Your essential well-being never disappears. It is always present. But it can be obscured by the clouds of self-preoccupation. Let me tell you something. There is a profound freedom in realizing that happiness does not depend on you enhancing, improving, or fixing yourself. It depends on temporarily stepping out of the self-improvement project altogether and recognizing the awareness that has been present all along, witnessing the whole drama of seeking. But here is the thing. This cannot be just another strategy of the seeking mind. If you approach these three paths as techniques to get happiness, you have already missed the point. They are not means to an end. They are recognitions of what is already true. Presence, acceptance, and release of self-concern are not things you do to get happy. They are ways of noticing the happiness that is already here, beneath the activity of seeking. You see, when we stop treating happiness as an object to be acquired and recognize it as the subject that we already are, everything changes. The very foundation of our seeking is revealed to be based on a misunderstanding. It is as if we have been searching the world for our eyeglasses while wearing them the whole time. Or like fish swimming everywhere in search of water. Think about it. In your deepest moments of clarity, have you not sensed that what you are looking for is what is looking? That the awareness in which all experience arises is itself what you have been seeking through all those experiences? This is not abstract philosophy. It is the most practical recognition possible, for it liberates us from the endless cycle of seeking what we already are. Happiness, like a butterfly, lands softly on your shoulder precisely when you have forgotten to chase it. When your attention is no longer consumed with your own happiness project, but is freely engaged with life as it presents itself. Happiness reveals itself as your natural state. Not because you have finally arranged all the conditions correctly, but because you have stopped believing that it depends on conditions at all. This is not to say that your life will be free from pain, challenge, or difficulty. Life will continue to be life, with all its complexity and unpredictability. But beneath the changing weather of your experience, you may discover an unchanging sky of awareness in which all weather patterns come and go. And in that recognition lies a happiness that nothing can disturb, because it depends on nothing. Now, I am not saying this is easy. The habit of seeking happiness is deeply ingrained in our culture and our minds. We have been conditioned since childhood to pursue happiness as something outside ourselves, something to be attained through effort, achievement, acquisition. This conditioning runs deep. It will not dissolve overnight simply because we intellectually understand its limitations. Be gentle with yourself as you explore this new way of relating to happiness. Old habits do not disappear immediately. They gradually lose their power as we bring awareness to them. Let me tell you something about living this paradox. It is not about abandoning all goals and aspirations. We can have aims and intentions without making our happiness dependent on their achievement. This is the middle path between aimless drifting and compulsive striving. We can move purposefully in directions that align with our values while remaining unattached to specific outcomes. We can act without the heavy burden of believing our well-being hangs in the balance of success or failure. Think about it. When we no longer make our happiness conditional upon results, we are free to engage wholeheartedly with the process itself. The musician plays not just to reach the end of the composition, but for the joy of creating each note. The gardener tends plants not just for the harvest, but for the pleasure of participation in growth. The parent raises a child not just to produce a successful adult, but for the profound privilege of witnessing and supporting a life unfolding. This shift in understanding transforms our everyday experience. Ordinary moments become extraordinary, not because they are special, but because we are fully present for them. The simple act of drinking a cup of tea becomes a complete experience when we are not simultaneously evaluating whether it is making us happy enough or planning what we will do next to secure more happiness. The walk through the neighborhood becomes a journey of discovery when we are not comparing it to some imagined better experience we could be having elsewhere. You see, this approach is like swimming with the current of a river rather than against it. When we fight the flow of life, insisting it conform to our demands before we will be happy, we exhaust ourselves. We may make incremental progress, but at what cost? When we align ourselves with the river, recognizing its power and working with its movement, we can travel much further with far less strain. We remain active, responsive, engaged, but without the tension of resistance. This does not mean passivity or indifference. Quite the opposite. When we are not consumed with securing our own happiness, we are more available to engage fully with life and others. Our attention is no longer divided between the present experience and our evaluation of whether it meets our happiness requirements. We can listen more deeply, see more clearly, act more effectively, love more freely. Paradoxically, it is when we stop obsessing over our own happiness that we become most capable of contributing to the well-being of all. I once knew a woman who embodied this understanding beautifully. She had not arrived at it through philosophy or spiritual teaching, but through life experience that had stripped away her illusions. She had faced significant hardships, including serious illness and the loss of close relationships. Through these difficulties, she had discovered something precious. Not in spite of her challenges, but because of them, she had learned to stop making her happiness conditional on circumstances. She lived with remarkable presence. Whether engaged in conversation, preparing a meal, or simply sitting quietly, she brought her full attention to the moment. She had goals and worked toward them diligently, but with an unusual lightness of being. Success did not inflate her, nor did setbacks deflate her. Her baseline contentment remained steady regardless of external conditions. What struck me most was how this internal freedom affected her relationships with others. Without the need to extract happiness from people or situations, she related to everyone with unusual openness and generosity. Her happiness was not dependent on others behaving a certain way, so she could accept them as they were, without the subtle manipulations we often engage in to make others conform to our needs. She was not a saint or a spiritual master. She had moments of frustration, sadness, anger like anyone else. But these emotions moved through her without defining her. Like weather patterns crossing an open sky, her life was not perfect by conventional standards, but it possessed a quality of authenticity and peace that was unmistakable. So you see, happiness is not something you pursue, but something you allow. It is not something you achieve, but something you notice. And in that curious paradox lies freedom. When you stop seeking happiness as something apart from your present experience, you may find it has been here all along, waiting patiently for you to notice. The butterfly you have been chasing so desperately does not need to be captured. It needs only to be appreciated as it moves through the open field of your awareness. The happiness you seek is not in some distant future when all conditions are perfect. It is in the midst of this messy, complex, imperfect moment, waiting to be recognized beneath the very search for something else. We are already what we seek. We already have what we long for. The separate self that appears to lack happiness is itself just another appearance within the awareness that we fundamentally are. When this is seen clearly, not just understood intellectually, but recognized directly, the search can finally come to rest. Not because it has achieved its goal, but because it has recognized its own unnecessary nature. You are the open space in which all experience arises, including the experience of seeking happiness. That open space is itself what you have been seeking through all your experiences. When you recognize this, you are free. Free from the exhausting cycle of pursuing what you already are. Free to engage with life not as a means to some future happiness, but as the expression of the happiness that is already present as your most fundamental nature. This does not mean life will always feel pleasant. Pain, challenge, and difficulty remain part of the human experience. But even in the midst of difficulty, you may discover an underlying peace that comes not from having everything you want, but from wanting everything you have. Not from controlling life, but from embracing it exactly as it presents itself. The paradox we began with now reveals its deeper truth. When you stop seeking happiness as something to be attained in the future, you may discover it as something that has been present all along. Like coming home after a long journey only to realize you never actually left. Like waking from a dream of searching only to find that what you sought was what was seeking. In this recognition, there is peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on favorable conditions, but the unshakable peace that remains steady in all conditions. This is the gift that awaits us when we release our grip on the pursuit of happiness and open to the happiness that has been pursuing us all along. So I invite you right now to pause, to take a breath, to notice the awareness in which these words appear, to feel the aliveness of this moment. And in that simple act of noticing, perhaps you will glimpse what has been here all along, behind all your searching. The happiness you seek is not something to find, but something to recognize. It is not something you have, but something you are. And it is available right now, in this very moment, if only you will stop looking for it elsewhere.